Your daily fix of women's mixed martial arts from the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and one championship. Be in the loop, because Golden State Media Concepts got you covered. Get your fix of women's MMA with Got You Covered on Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Darnell De Leon, and hopefully your day is going well. Wherever you are, whoever you are, hopefully your day is going well as we persevere through yet another tough year in the world, specifically in America. Living in Los Angeles County, this place can get pretty darn hectic, but you know what, things are kind of slowly dialing down here. We got audience members coming back in sporting events. Now, obviously, 2 weeks ago, we had a Super Bowl. That crowd there, yes, about maybe half of that was like posters and like fake people, not real actual people. But in the other half, we had actual like large audiences. And I'm thinking with the Super Bowl, we could potentially go have more people come into these like sports shows. It's currently happening with the Sacramento Kings, happening with the Phoenix Suns, happening for the Atlanta Magic. Some teams, I know the Los Angeles Lakers, they're not having people right now in their sporting events. But there are some teams that are doing so. There are some sporting events that do have audience members in it, and it makes me kind of excited. It is. Also, considering that if you go watch the news, the number of cases that are happening right now in the LA County has been going down. It's been going down, and also, if LA County is going down, then generally most of America should be going down. And it's true. Most states are a lot more lenient in terms of having group events and activities happening. In the Irvine area, which is just 50 minutes away from where I live, if you go to any of the malls, it looks like there was even never a COVID in the first place. Things are getting pretty normal, pretty stable. But you know what? If you are still in fear of COVID and you want to be 100% healthy, then feel free to go and stay at home, be safe. The vaccinations are out. You may take the vaccinations at your own accord. You don't have to if you don't want to, but the options out there. But as the world is getting normalized, the PFL season, their season is going to start off in April. We have Bellator. We don't know when officially their events are going to be happening, but their rankings are changing, so that's one thing at least. One thing. One championships, they already have, like, their stuff is pretty normal. The way how they're filming their shows right now, it doesn't look like there's an audience, but there is an audience there. And for the UFC, things fell apart with the NY and the UFC as they were trying to go and get a show happening in East Asia. I think it was specifically Singapore. They wanted an event to happen there. And if there was an event that would happen in Singapore, there'd be some audience members there in attendance for the show, which I think would be great. Because the event that the UFC was trying to go for was Zhang Weili versus Nunes. That fight being the main event of that card that would happen in East Asia. That fell off. So now it's very likely we might see the Apex facility building being the host of Nunes versus Zhang Weili. Let's cross your fingers that hopefully that fight, that event goes off soon. So, but tonight, though, I'll be discussing UFC Fight Nights. Curtis Blaydes versus Derek Lewis. That was the main event. And the co-main event, we had Ketlen Vieira versus Yana Kunitskaya. So, not just this fight here, but the entire night was full of controversy. We got the fight with Phil Hawes. We got the fight here with Ketlen Vieira and Yana Kunitskaya because the score came down to Yana Kunitskaya winning by unanimous decision. And I'm looking at this fight. I'm looking at the fight stats. I rewatched it over again. And I'm thinking to myself right now, Ketlen Vieira, at least I believe, should defeat Yana Kunitskaya. I believe so. And so I look at the fight stats here, and the fight stats are completely different from the eye test. The way how I see it, based off my eye test, it was Ketlen Vieira grappling and wrestling with Yana Kunitskaya in the first round, second and third round, then turns to Yana Kunitskaya, slowing the pace down. She's striking with her a little bit, but for the most part, Ketlen Vieira is able to go get the takedowns in. She was 3 of 8 in her takedown attempts. She was 3 of 8 in her takedown attempts. Was able to land her takedowns, and in the moments that Ketlen Vieira was grappling with Yana Kunitskaya, I did hear Daniel Cormier said that Ketlen Vieira is being inactive. And I'm thinking to myself right now, like, what does it mean to be inactive when you're controlling your opponent on the ground? What does it mean? Because Ketlen Vieira, she landed 35 of 51 total strikes. 35 of 51. You compare that to Yana Kunitskaya, who landed 215 out of 247. Now, obviously, you're going to be like, okay, Yana Kunitskaya, she landed over 180 strikes. 180 strikes more than Ketlen Vieira. She also landed 40 more significant strikes, with Ketlen Vieira landing 7 of 16. Yana Kunitskaya landed 47 of 60 significant strikes. You think to yourself, just by looking at the numbers, oh man, this is a wash. This is an obvious wash here. Yana Kunitskaya completely tore about Ketlen Vieira. That's what the fight stats say. But in the eye test, what happened was, yes, Yana Kunitskaya was landing a multitude of a lot of shots on the Ketlen Vieira, but for as much striking as Yana Kunitskaya did, she did very little damage. Very little. There was very little damage being done onto Ketlen Vieira. Yana Kunitskaya was pretty much head-hunting this entire fight, and even then, there was never a level of fear or anticipation of, oh my goodness, Yana Kunitskaya, she's completely tearing apart Ketlen Vieira here with the striking. Oh man, she's being a proper headhunter here, landing some hard jabs and hard shots. No, I never felt like that ever. When we got to the middle of the second round, and there was a graphic that popped up that showed the fight stats, that showed that Yana Kunitskaya was landing significantly a lot more strikes than Ketlen Vieira in a per round basis, you can hear the commentary team being like, really? Kunitskaya is landing that many shots? It doesn't feel like it. Really? Ketlen Vieira only landed that little? Doesn't feel like it. Doesn't seem like it. If I never knew what the stats were, I would have said this was a back and forth battle, which is so strange, because 180 strikes. I guess the reason why I did not perceive Yana Kunitskaya having 180 more strikes than Ketlen Vieira, which is crazy to think about, it would have to be because in the moments that Yana Kunitskaya was winning the bouts, it never really felt like Yana Kunitskaya was ever putting the pressure on Vieira. And it never felt like Yana was the one who was dictating the pace of the fights. She wasn't the one being hyperactive. What was happening was, we had Ketlen Vieira pressuring down Yana, being hyperactive, being the aggressor here, and trying to go for takedowns, and there was a whole lot of clinch work that was happening here. And while Ketlen Vieira was attempting to go for leg trips, or was trying to go find a good position for herself to go for a takedown when they're on the cage, when they're inside in the cage, Yana Kunitskaya was constantly landing like jabs to the face. And because of that, you can say, well, yeah, they're both clinching, but within that short, like 20-second clinching span, Yana Kunitskaya landed 10 strikes. Meanwhile, Ketlen Vieira is just like trying to go stomp the legs, and trying to go for a leg trip, and trying to go bring it to the ground. Yana Kunitskaya, she did really well for herself in terms of preventing the takedowns, but when she did get on the ground, it was like no joke. Ketlen Vieira was dominating Yana in the ground. First round, Vieira was grappling. Second round, Yana Kunitskaya was able to avoid so. And then third round, making Ketlen Vieira, being the pressure fighter that she is, takes her down and wrestles with her. And you hear Cormier on commentary being like, Ketlen Vieira, she's not really being active. She's not being really active. All because you get a takedown in doesn't mean you should be winning the fight. All because you're controlling your opponent on the ground doesn't mean you're actually winning the fight. And I'm thinking about this right now, because that is ridiculous to say. It is ridiculous to go say, well, all because you're controlling your opponent on the ground, that doesn't mean you're winning the fight. That's so bizarre, because when you look at someone even like Daniel Cormier, when he fought against Derek Lewis, for the most part, he just grappled with Derek Lewis until he was tired on the ground. And they just did ground pound action on him, like Daniel Cormier versus Anderson Silva. It was Cormier shooting for a takedown and controlling Anderson Silva on the ground for the better part of the entire fight. How could you say that controlling your opponent on the ground isn't active? That to me is very upsetting, because now you're thinking to yourself right now, what matters in wrestling? If a fighter were to strike you 100 plus more times, like how Yana did to Vieira, what does Vieira have to do in terms of the grappling, in terms of the wrestling, in order for her to be equivalent to Yana Kunitskaya in striking? What does she have to do? Well, you might think to yourself right now, alright then, Ketlen Vieira, she has to do some ground pound action, she has to strike her on the ground as much as Yana Kunitskaya did when they were standing up. But what does ground control matter? Does ground control matter if you go for a takedown? No. If your opponent hits you 20 times in the face, and then you take your opponent down, and you control your opponent on the ground, and you did maybe like 4 strikes on top position, but you're keeping them on the ground, you're pressuring, you're essentially wrestling them. If you're successfully wrestling against your opponents and you're preventing them from getting back up, should you be rewarded any points? And it's not like Ketlen Vieira shot her for a takedown, and then they were stuck in guard position throughout the entire of the fight. No, it wasn't like that. We have Ketlen Vieira, she goes in, shoots in for a takedown, she gets a takedown in, and then she's constantly switching positions. Full guard, half guard, to side control, attempts to go for mount, doesn't able to get the mount, gets in side control, gets on half guard, gets on full guard. She puts so much pressure onto Yana Kunitskaya that by the tail end of the third round, or by the middle half of the third round, Yana Kunitskaya was pretty spent. She was. What does it mean to significantly strike against your opponent if, when you see the striking, you're like, okay, there's no way she'd be knocking around? Because I'm looking at this fight, and it never looked like ever that Ketlen Vieira had to worry about Yana striking. Commentator team, they're like, well, Yana, she's pulling out some strikes here, but nothing really landing or anything significant. And it turns out she was landing a number of significant shots, and I don't understand what counted as significant, what counted as not significant. If someone takes you down and they control you for the better part of 2.5, 3 minutes, and then when they stand back up, the person who's doing all the striking is landing these very soft shots that you know aren't going to stun or knock out your opponent, are you going to reward the points, or are you going to reward the round to the fighter who is landing those shots? I don't know. This reminds me also a lot of Covington versus Robbie Lawler when they fought, because when you saw that fight there, now obviously Robbie Lawler, he ended up losing that bout. But because Covington, his strikes were so lacking in terms of power, in terms of actually being a threat to his opponent, he's unloading all these shots, but then these shots don't at all like Dave's Robbie Lawler. Like Robbie Lawler, by the end of the fight, despite accumulating so much strikes to the head, it was like perfectly normal and was ready to go and continue fighting another couple months later. So what does it mean to strike, and what does it mean to control your opponent in the ground? Merab Dvalishvili is one fighter who I enjoy watching. Merab Dvalishvili is one of the most exciting fighters out there to watch. But Merab Dvalishvili, essentially all those bouts essentially become Dvalishvili, he goes in, gets a takedown in, and then they stand back up. Does Merab Dvalishvili get any points for taking out his opponents? Does taking out your opponent matter more than ground control? Because I think Merab Dvalishvili has got the record right now for most takedowns ever in a UFC fight. I think it's like 12. Like he got 12 takedowns within the span of 5 minutes in a first round. He was able to do that. And you hear the commentary team be like, oh my gosh, Merab Dvalishvili, this guy is a wrestling nightmare. Dang. But he doesn't keep his opponent in the ground for no more than 15 seconds. This happened in his fight against John Dodson. So does it matter? Within ground control, takedowns, and strikes, of the three, how do judges perceive these three, and what matters more to them? Well, I'm guessing these three judges, they saw Yana Kunitskaya's stats, they saw that she was a lot more active in the stand-up, and because of that, they gave Yana Kunitskaya the victory, winning the fight via unanimous decision. I definitely did not agree with the decision. I think Vieira should have won. I think Vieira's ground control mattered a lot more than the strikes that Yana was able to pull off, considering how weak those fights were, and the fact that the striking of Yana never, ever put Vieira in a position where she was in real danger. So it's hard for me to really respect Yana's striking if it never felt like or seemed like that she was putting pressure onto Vieira, especially since Vieira was the one who was being aggressive and the one forcing the action and being active in the bouts against Yana. I don't know, other people saw something else in the fights that I wasn't able to see. I would love to see an explanation as to how the judging went down for that fight. So this is coming from the post-fight presser from Yana Kunitskaya. She goes on to say that when I was preparing for this camp, one of my sparring partners was Kayla Harrison, PFL 155-pound champion there. She's a really strong girl, so I was preparing for a fighter who was more weak than her, so I was surprised. Sometimes I gave her a mistake in a good position, but I found I could punch from there. When she took my back, for example, I still can beat her. Yes, I was surprised. The game plan was standing, punching her, kicking, and trying not to go to the ground. Then, if it's onto the ground, try to punch her from any position. So I didn't do a very good job in the first part. Sometimes I did mistakes and went to the ground, but I did pretty good in punching her from any position, and that's why I feel I won this fight, because I kept active from any position. When she took my back, I was active in punching. When the fight got finished, I felt that for myself that I won the fight. I did enough. I did more damage than her, but sometimes it's a strange decision. But Diego Santos came to me and said, congratulations, and I thought, but maybe I didn't win. Diego then says, no, you won. And this time I believed him and was just waiting for the results. She goes on to say that anyone who is above me in the rankings, I would be happy with this fight. I'm not planning to fight as many times as possible. I will be focusing on quality. Well, she did do enough for the judges to go see her, being like, yeah, she won the fight. Now, how many of those strikes from bottom position counted as significant strikes? I'm not really sure. Because, yes, Yana, she was very active, even though she was in the bottom position, but should those bottom position punches even count all that much, considering that they really didn't do that much damage? I'm not really sure. But you're listening to the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast, coming back after a short break here. See you soon.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info. Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And we are back. And so I'm discussing Yana Kunitskaya versus Ketlen Vieira. Yana Kunitskaya was able to defeat Ketlen Vieira by decision. Now, Yana Kunitskaya, she is challenging Aspen Ladd. She wants to face against Aspen Ladd, which makes sense in the rankings as they are within the top 6. So in terms of divisional rankings and matchups, that does make sense. Now, will she fight Aspen Ladd? I'm not really sure. And I think if we were to see Aspen Ladd versus Yana Kunitskaya again, because this would be a rematch, I think Aspen Ladd would win. Now, this might be a case of Yana Kunitskaya. I think she figured out the way on how to score the fights, because Aspen Ladd, she's the type of fighter to go wrestle you, take you to the ground, and ground control you. Now, usually, most people, when they're taken to the ground, they try to escape or they try to get out. Yana Kunitskaya, she talked about this in the post-fight presser, in the sense that she recognized that if she were to be active and go for a lot of shots from the bottom position, it kind of counts. It does. Even though it doesn't look like that she's actually winning, she is accumulating some strikes from bottom position. So I'm thinking right now, if Yana Kunitskaya were to fight against Aspen Ladd would go shoot for a takedown. Yana Kunitskaya would just go and try to punch her or do some form smashes from bottom position. And that would be just enough for Yana Kunitskaya to be able to go pull off for the victory. So, you might not like it. I don't like it. I don't like the way how Yana's fighting from bottom position. But if she figured out a way to crack the system and get the fight to be in her favor statistically, okay, I understand. So we go from one veteran making their comeback into the octagon to one fighter who left the octagon in order to pursue their career in bare knuckle boxing, and that is Paige Van Zandt. And so Paige Van Zandt, she made her debut against Britton Hartz for BKFC, and in the bout though, I will say this, she's a lot more confident in her fighting. I'll say this, one of the negative aspects of Paige Van Zandt is the fact that she just couldn't adjust or adapt to the grappling and to the wrestling game of MMA. Like, her stand-up is pretty solid. I wouldn't say it's like the best in the world, but it's pretty solid. And if given the option to go fight in the ground or a stand-up, Paige Van Zandt obviously prefers standing up. And I talked about this a month or 2 months ago, where I was saying that Paige Van Zandt going to BKFC was the right move. Is out of that or do some traditional boxing. I don't see Paige Van Zandt really having a career in MMA, which is very upsetting because she's only in her mid-20s. She has a lot of room to grow. But for Paige Van Zandt, I think that window has shut in terms of her actual ceiling is, in terms of wrestling and grappling. Because she's been training how to grapple and wrestle for years now. There seems to be this barrier that she isn't able to pass. And she doesn't have to deal with that barrier for BKFC. Now in her bout against Britta Knight, it was a good showcase for Paige Van Zandt. I think she should have made a couple more adjustments. She, I think, landed 5 more strikes than her opponents, than Britain Hart, but Britain Hart landed a lot more significant strikes and did a lot more better in the exchanges. While Paige Van Zandt was able to land and accumulate a lot more strikes than her opponent, she always lacked that punching power, and for BKFC, if she were to fight against somebody who's incredibly aggro and less technical, then it would be not in favor for Paige Van Zandt. So, Van Zandt, she ended up losing her debut in BKFC, but she's being paid a whole lot of money, and on top of that, she's fighting in a style that's a lot more comfortable for her. So, during a recent interview that she had with MMA Fighting, Bare Knuckle FC president Dave Friedman praised Paige Van Zandt in her effort earlier in the month, and she teased that she will be fighting against a well-known name for a second fight later this year. The president goes on to say that, and I quote, "I really take my hat off her because she didn't have to do this. Now I take my hat off to her even because she definitely doesn't have to do this again. She's doing it and she really wants to prove herself, and that's kind of a person that I want to be in business with. That kind of person I have a lot of respect for, so I can't wait to see what's going on with her next." Continues saying, "I think she's going to adapt a lot more. I think she's really going to take a step forward in her next fight. Pretty sure we have the opponent. We're just dotting the I's and the crossing the T's. On this one, it's another well-known name, and I think the public is really going to get behind this one. I think it's going to be a really competitive fight." Alright then, so who is she going to be fighting? It's a mystery opponent. We do not know. But with that being said, though, I will say this. Paige Van Zandt, she looks like she enjoys it. She did. Even in the, when the referee is going to raise up one of their hands, Paige Van Zandt was looking around being like, yeah, I think I did enough. I believe I am definitely good enough. And even in loss, she was like, okay, I lost that one, but I feel proud of how I fought there. And there have been moments in her MMA career where if she was losing, her brain just turns off and she just doesn't try anymore. In this scenario here, where she was getting rocked for the first 2 rounds, and the best rounds for Paige Van Zandt came in the 3rd and 4th round, Paige Van Zandt, she came back. She did. Her brain didn't turn off. She kept fighting through. She became a lot more active when she knew that she was in danger, and that shows that Paige Van Zandt does care, that she really does want to go and improve and become better. And even though when she is down, she's trying to go stand right to back up and go and pursue her opponent. She became ultra aggressive in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round. Sadly, she was way too passive in the 1st and 2nd round, which led to her loss to Britta Knight. Another fighter looks to make their debut for Bellator MMA as undefeated Yana Azkarova finally announced the date for a highly anticipated Bellator MMA debut. Undefeated flyweight prospect Yana Azkarova has officially announced a date for a highly anticipated MMA debut for Bellator. Azkarova, who is 2-0 in her MMA career, signed with Bellator MMA back in 2019, but has yet to make a promotional debut. She announced earlier this month that visa issues have been resolved and expects her to make a debut later, sometime this year. And she says specifically, April 9, Bellator 256 is the date that she will make her MMA debut for Bellator. Invicta FC champ Alicia Zappitella announces new venture set to co-host MMA Jam live radio show. Invicta FC Atomweight champion Alicia Zappitella is continuing to expand her work outside the cage and has announced that she will join as the co-host for MMA Jam live radio. On Sunday, MMA Jam Live Radio confirmed that Alicia Zappitelli will be joining their team as the official co-host. The Invicta FC Atomweight champion reacted to the news with an official statement. She goes on to say, and I quote, "I am so thrilled to be joining MMA Jam Live. This is my first step to really starting a career in the MMA world outside of the cage, and I think it's going to be a fun venture." MMA Jam Live is expected to launch on the 2nd week of March, with more details set to be released in the near future via the organization's social media pages. Zappitella is one of the fastest rising stars in the MMA world after enjoying a huge successful breakout year. During 2020, the 25-year-old went 3-0 during the year, and it ended by submitting Ashley Cummins to capture the prestigious Invicta FC Atomweight title. Her nickname, Half Pint, has the big plans for 2021. Inside and outside the MMA cage, has recently declared that she believes she's the best fighter in the world at 105 pounds, and is right up there among the best at 115 pounds. So congratulations for Zappitella out there. I am happy whenever fighters are able to go find alternative ways of making money, especially in the world of MMA. I've talked about this in the past, where I'm a firm believer that everyone and anyone, it doesn't matter who you are, whether you are an MMA fighter or you work as a clerk or work in an office, you should always find alternative ways to go make extra income. In a recent article that I found, it was posted that 49%, and this is earlier last year, that 49% of Americans were able to get money and accumulate money from alternative means of income. So they're not working just one job, they're working 2 jobs, maybe 3 jobs. And since a lot of people are now, doing YouTube channels, doing Twitch, doing alternative means, whether it be working through social media or working other jobs, it kind of is a normal thing nowadays to do multiple jobs. It's no longer the aspect of, you find your career, you do this, and then you make money from that one job exclusively. It's no longer like that anymore. Even NBA athletes, they are making just as much money, if not more money, doing other things that go beyond the sport that they are playing. So once again, congratulations for Alicia Zapatella. So Bellator signs yet another fighter here, who hopes to go make their debut sometime in April. Bellator signs judo camp Diana Silva, set to make her promotional debut against Julia Budd in April. As first reported by Combate, highly touted prospect Diana Silva is set to make her Bellator MMA debut on April 9 when she takes on the organization's former featherweight champion, Julia Budd. Silva, who's 9-5 in her MMA career, she is an exciting prospect coming out of Brazil, hoping to go make a splash in the Western MMA scene. The 30-year-old is a tough and gritty veteran fighter who has already fought some of the best in the world. All the Brazilians' most recent losses come from split and majority decisions to losing to fighters like Jennifer Maia, PFL's Brandon Moraz, as well as Giselle Maria on an episode of Dana White's Contender Series. Silva will end up fighting against a tough opponent, Julia Budd, who is a former champion. I'm going to say this right now, I don't expect Silva to win it. I really don't, but you know what? Upsets happen in the world of mixed martial arts. So speaking of one fighter who is known for pulling out upsets or underdogs who want to go out there and prove themselves, it has to be Angela Hill and Ashley Yoder. Angela Hill and Ashley Yoder, these 2 fighters will be competing on February 27, UFC Vegas 20, this week. Yes. The official announcements of the match being set took place 6 days before the actual fight. These fighters have 6 days prep time to be prepared and to fight with one another. Now, I follow Ashley Yoder and Angela Hill on Twitter, and both these fighters, they're very active. They're constantly active, they're working on the gym. Even though there's no fights being set up for them, they're constantly training, they're in their fight camp, they're training their boxing, their grappling abilities. So even though it kind of is messed up that these 2 fighters who have a lot to gain off just winning one fight and trying to get themselves in the rankings for the strawweight division, both these women here, they are being active. They are trying to go and accept, they're trying to accept any fight that's being brought to them, because you know what? The fight game is full of opportunities. This is an opportunity for both fighters, and I expect these 2 to not end off with a huge knockout or submission victory. I'm going to say this fight's going to end with Angela Hill winning the bout via unanimous decision. Either unanimous or majority decision here. I think this fight is going to be very exciting for UFC Vegas 20, February 27, with the main event being Jazona Rosenstrike versus Cecile Gaines. So I'm always excited for whenever there's a new fight being added in the fight card. It's just very interesting to see that more so than any other year ever, there are so many fights that are being made, like impromptu, like, hey, guess what? There's going to be a fight coming up this week involving these 2 fighters who just were notified that they're going to fight this week. A lot of last-minute stuff happening, but that's of course what happens. And even in the year of 2021, there are a lot of fights that are impromptu being set up that fighters have a very short notice time frame to go set themselves up. And also, considering the fact that these fighters, like Angela Hill, who although doesn't have the best record, because she's always going out there and she's always available to go compete and fight in the last minute, while also having these exciting bouts, makes her and Ashley Yoder very valuable commodities for the UFC. So congratulations for both of them. They're both going to be able to go get a big payday. I expect these 2 to have a barn burner of a fight. So major new details on the return of popular UFC strawweight Karolina Kowalkiewicz. So Karolina Kowalkiewicz, she is 12-6, announced last month that she is plotting for a return to the cage later this year. However, now even more details have emerged on the popular UFC star's comeback. According to a new report by Polish publication In the Cage, Kowalkiewicz is now looking for a return in April or maybe May, and also she'll be training in America under the supervision of Trevor Whitman. Now, to those who don't know who Trevor Whitman is, she's the trainer of Rose Namajunas, who will be fighting for the title in the strawweight division. So yes, Karolina Kowalkiewicz, she will be making a comeback, and she'll be training under the best striking coaches out there, one of the best trainers out there. And for Karolina Kowalkiewicz, there was 2 years ago, there was a discussion going on like, oh man, Karolina Kowalkiewicz, this girl is a future champion. This girl, she's got all the talent, all the skills. It's just she ended up going through this huge losing streak. It was like a 4-5 fight losing streak. And then she went on to do an interview where she says that she's not mentally in the right place, that she had to go take a break from fighting in order for her to go rebound back. So, you know what? I like Carolina Kowalik. When she was active and when she was making the climb up in the divisional rankings, she was an exciting fighter. She was. But as time went on, after she lost her bout against Joanna Jędrzejczyk, she transformed herself from being alright, this fighter is like very flashy, very fun, very aggressive, a polished striker. And then after a fight with Joanna, she became incredibly passive. And it seems to be there seems to be like a mental barrier for her whenever her opponent just dives in for either a takedown or dives in doing some like striking combinations, doing these like insane 50-50 exchanges. Like Carolina Kowalik, who used to be comfortable fighting people inside the pocket, now is just poking her opponent. She's poking her opponent. She's always backing away all the time whenever her opponent tries to engage with her. She's trying to win all the time via the point system, and she wasn't always like that. So Carla Kowalik, I am excited for her. Hopefully, just have her fingers be crossed here, that under the supervision of Trevor Whitman, she'll become a much better fighter. She is 35 years old, so she is getting up there in terms of age, but she has all the talent. She has all the talent. She was formerly the number 2 ranked fighter in the strawweight division, and then she dropped out of it. Now she's outside the top 10. Maybe the short time off is going to help out Carolina. She's under a new coach, and for a lot of these fighters, when they do go through losing streaks, all they need is motivation. They just need something to tell them, hey, you can do this, you got this. And it seems like Carolina Kowalik, she got her motivation, her drive back to go compete yet again. So I'm happy for Carolina, and I'm excited for the future of the strawweight division as it continues to go get more deeper and deeper as time goes on. You're listening to the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast, coming back after a short break here. See you soon.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play. This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And we're back. So it was announced officially that we're going to have Holly Holm versus Juliana Pena coming up in a UFC Fight Night event happening in May. And you got to give huge respect for Pena, because Julia Pena, her last loss was to Germaine de Randamie, who is ranked currently number 2, right behind Amanda Nunes, who's the number 1 fighter in the women's bantamweight division is. Then she'll be fighting against Holly Holm, who is ranked number 3. So, Julia Pena, huge respect for her for calling out the champion. Now, obviously, everybody made fun of her. I made fun of Pena because it was a huge call-out. Even the commentary team and Dominic Cruz and Cormier, you're talking like, whoa, Pena, you're actually challenging Amanda Nunes? Wow. Oh my goodness. Really? Dang, you're brave. Because in Pena versus Amanda Nunes, it has to be like minus 900 Pena. There's very little confidence that Pena can go defeat Nunes, and with the way how she fights compared to Nunes, in the sense like there's no aspect of the fight game that Pena in theory is better at than Nunes, and she's fighting against pretty much a living legend and future Hall of Famer for me in the UFC, Holly Holm. Yeah, like Pena is she's aiming high. You gotta respect for that. She's aiming high. if she were to defeat Holly Holm, which, by the way, I think Pena will defeat Holly Holm. I do believe that. She's right behind GDR, and it's very likely we're going to see Amanda Nunes versus Jermaine Durandame, whether she wins or loses against Megan Anderson, because she's defending the featherweight belt against Megan Anderson. So, expect Nunes to defend her bantamweight title against GDR either the end of this year or early next year. And then afterwards, then Pena is right behind her, next in line. We don't know what the update is for Raquel Pennington, and other than that though, Irene Aldana, she ended up losing to Holly Holm. Logically, Pena should be next in line after GDR. That's if Nunes were to defeat GDR. Now, if GDR were able to defeat Amanda Nunes, then we could see, Nunes versus Jermaine Durandame 3. That could be a possibility. Or Pena versus either of those two fighters. No matter what, though, Pena, she's in a really good position for herself. She called it champion. She says she's better than GDR. If all things turn out well, Juliana Pena could be in the main event of a UFC pay-per-view. And you got to give 2 thumbs up for that. Especially for a fighter who the large majority of people don't respect at all in the first place. Not because she's a bad fighter, but because her skill set is nowhere near, in theory, better than someone like Amanda Nunes. And a lot of people are definitely not pegging Pena as being the person who's going to stop the lioness. So last week, I made a list of the 24 best fighters in mixed martial arts in the world. I was doing that because the NBA All-Stars were announced, to which they announced the 12 best players in the Western Conference and the 12 best players in the Eastern Conference. So I decided to make the 24 best fighters in mixed martial arts today. And there I brought a combination of one championship fighters, some Bellator fighters, some UFC fighters. And for today, I wanted to name the 12 best UFC fighters specifically if I were to make an all-star team. Like, what would be the all-star team for the UFC? Now, this is in no way, shape, or form a disrespect for fighters like Julia Budd, Lee McFarlane, George Gagnon, Angela Lee. No disrespect to them. Like, fighters like them and Chris Cyborg, they're awesome, but I want to make a simplified list here for the UFC, considering the UFC is the largest Western MMA organization out there in the world. So I want to dial down and focus in on the fighters from the UFC here. Once again, no respect. They're great fighters throughout one championship. Like fighters like Meng Bo and Tiffany Teo are stellar and are absolutely underrated. If you are not watching the women's divisions happening in one championships, I highly recommend you do. But I made a list here. These are the 12 best fighters in the women's divisions for the UFC here. For the rankings, take it or leave it here. But for number 1, I put here Zhang Weili. Yes, I'm putting Zhang Weili as the number 1 women's fighter currently for the UFC. Now, when I made this list, I was thinking of it being a combination of, okay, who are the most exciting fighters to watch? Who are the fighters who are most likely to make the biggest noise? Who are the fighters who I am most excited to go watch and that's going to go create a buzz? And there's any fighter right now in the UFC, it's Zhang Weili. And by number 2 is Amanda Nunes. But the reason why I put Zhang Weili over Amanda Nunes is the fact that, well, Zhang Weili, her being a Chinese fighter, she has a large ceiling. Like, her ceiling is up in the air, much more higher than any other fighter in terms of being this huge, mega, international global star. The UFC wants to focus in on the East Asian market, and the East Asian market really hasn't been tapped into for a couple years. I remember a couple years ago that my cousin would be watching all these shows, and he would always tell me, oh man, if there's an Asian fighter fighting the UFC, they're probably going to lose. And that's because during the 2000s and the early 2010s, there wasn't that much representation of great fighters who are moving up in the rankings for the UFC who are East Asian. You have like Mark Munoz and like Sexyama. Beyond those though, yes, we have like legends like Kazuchika Sakuraba, but within the realm of the UFC in the 2000s and the early 2010s, we didn't see that much East Asian representation. And with the UFC focusing in on East Asia for being a market, them building a performance center in China, and Zhang Weili being promoted as this mega big superstar who, by the way, is able to appeal to a large audience that goes beyond mixed martial arts. And the fact that America has a very growing East Asian market and East Asian audience, yeah, it makes perfect sense as to why one could go look at Zhang Weili and be like, yeah, she is more likely to bring in new eyes and viewers while also bringing exciting fights for the UFC. Now, Amanda Nunes, though, she is currently at a point now where she is a big superstar, without a doubt about it. She's a superstar, one of the biggest names ever. She is the GOAT of the women's division. You could arguably say that she is the GOAT of the UFC. I will say that it's a coin toss between Jon Jones and Amanda Nunes, as in who are the two best ever in their respective runs in the UFC. Like GSP, Amanda Nunes, Anderson Silva, Jon Jones. Those are the fighters who you think of as like arguably being the greatest of all time in the UFC and in mixed martial arts in general. They are that great. But with that being said, though, Amanda Nunes currently in 2021, I'm making this list, these 12 fighters, relative to what's currently happening in the year of 2021 and what we can expect from their upcoming bouts. And I think it's very safe to say right now that the current iteration of Amanda Nunes we're seeing right now is probably the best version of Nunes ever. She's got great knockout power, and she's dialing down in the wrestling. She's very similar to Cyborg, where both of their careers are very interesting. We got these two Brazilian knockout artists who, over time, upon winning a championship, then become like wrestlers and technical boxers and fighters who are trying to win via the point system. And I think things really turned down in terms of people's liking of Amanda Nunes ever since her fight with Germaine de Randamie. Because Germaine de Randamie did put some kinks in the armor of Nunes, and then Nunes then relied on wrestling, which is one element that Germaine de Randamie is really bad at, because she's like a top-tier S-level striker, great kickboxer, but her grappling leaves a lot to be left desired. So with that being said, I put Nunes behind Zhang Weili, because when you look at the grand scheme of things of what's happening in the featherweight division and the bantamweight division, who do you reasonably see defeating Nunes? Who? Germaine de Randamie? And then who else? There's Juliana Pena, but I'm going to bet money right now that it's very unlikely that Pena is going to defeat Amanda Nunes. I'm not disrespecting Pena, it's just Nunes, how I see it, is in a completely different level compared to everyone else in the bantamweight division. Chael Sonnen talked about it, where he said that the bantamweight division is pretty stale right now because there is a lack of competition there. Nunes, coincidentally enough, is in the same position as Jon Jones when he was the light heavyweight champion, where it looked like it was Jon Jones and then everyone else. In this case, we got Nunes, maybe Germaine de Randamie, maybe Juliana Pena, and then everyone else. It's very unlikely Holly Holm is going to go and get another title run in the bantamweight division. Unlikely of that even happening. So, because of that, we have Zhang Weili, who's competing in, I say, the best women's division out there right now in the UFC. She's fighting against Rose Namajunas. She defeated Jessica Andrade. Jessica Andrade could come back at any moment, and we could see a better version of her fight against Zhang Weili, and that's a coin toss. A lot of Zhang Weili's fights are coin tosses, and I think, to me, that's what makes her title run the most intriguing. Because when we look at Nunes and even Valentina Shevchenko, we're like, they're going to go in there, they're probably going to win. And you see Zhang Weili against Namajunas, against Ioana Jędrzejczyk, against Jessica Andrade, against the up-and-coming Marina Rodriguez, against someone like Carla Esparza, against someone like Amanda Ribas. The division for the strawweights is stacked. And because of that, there is so much potential for Zhang Weili to go pull off these amazing performances in these very close bouts here that aren't available for Amanda Nunes and Valentina. Zhang Weili, you think she could beat Rose Namajunas? I'm not really sure. Coin toss. Can she beat Carla Esparza? I'm not really sure. Coin toss. That's what makes it very interesting. Now, I'm not saying Zhang Weili is a better fighter than Nunes. What I'm saying that as we look down the line here, looking towards the future, the ceiling and potential of Zhang Weili in terms of being a great star, in terms of pulling out more better performances, in terms of having more exciting fights, is more likely to happen more so than Amanda Nunes. And that same logic applies to the fighter who I rank here number 3, and that is Valentina Shevchenko. So rank 1 through 3 here are the 3 champions: the strawweight champion, the bantamweight/featherweight champion, and the flyweight champion. And I still remember the poll where it was given out, where it was saying, who is the champion who is the least likely to lose their belt anytime soon? And the number one fighter that came out there was Valentina Shevchenko. I believe that there is a higher chance of Nunes losing her belt, even with a depleted division in the featherweights and in the bantamweights, more so than Valentina losing her belt. Because Valentina's division is also, albeit lackluster, the upper echelon of the fight division. It is a fairly weak division. Fairly weak in the sense that fighters like Cynthia Calvillo, fighters like Lauren Murphy, Killian Chukagian, Roxanne Modafferi, Macy Barber, these are the top fighters in the fight division, and it is least likely that any of them will be able to defeat Valentina Shevchenko. The one fighter that really does seem like has the tools to go defeat someone like Valentina would be Jessica Andrade. Other than Jessica, who else can you conceivably see? Like, Jessica Andrade is pretty much the same position as Germaine Randamie, as these are the two women who are the ones who are most likely to end two dominant reigns in these women's divisions. And although Jessica Andrade here, she's a really great fighter, but she's going to go through a fight against Valentina as the underdog. So, what's next after Jessica if she'd go lose? I was really high on Cynthia Calvillo. I was really high on her. But then her last bout with Killian Chukagian didn't pan out well. We don't know what Chukagian's future is. She's pretty much stuck as a role as a gatekeeper. Joanne Calderwood, she pretty much went down as a gatekeeper after losing to Jennifer Maia. Jennifer Maia, after her performance, I don't see her having a title fight anytime soon against Valentina. And then we have prospects in the fight division. Fighters like Maria Agapova, whose stock pretty much dropped after her loss against Shayna Dobson. Now, Valentina and Amanda Nunes, they are stellar champions. They are, as how I view them, they are the two best champions, the two most dominant champions of all the UFC. They've held their belts longer than anyone else in the UFC, male or female, which in turn makes them both dominant champions, but also they are so dominant that they also coincidentally make all the fighters in their division look bad. Now, that is not their fault, because what do you expect to do? You're the champion, you're going out there defending your belts. I would like it if both the bantamweights and the fight division become a lot more deeper and they stack up the talents. Because it'd be one thing if it's, alright, Nunes, Valentina, they're dominant champions, but things are going so well for them that the division doesn't seem as exciting compared to other divisions out there. Remember, a big reason as to why people are right now excited for the middleweight, lightweight, and the light heavyweight division is because those three divisions have newly crowned champions. Newly crowned champions, so it feels like there's a breath of fresh air for those divisions. For the fight and bantamweights, though, it doesn't feel like that the divisions are stacked. It doesn't feel like we're seeing much diversity in terms of the top 5 rankings in these women's divisions. The win-loss records for fighters who are part of the top 10 for both the bantamweight and the fight divisions, some of them are subpar 500 or just above 500. There are prospects who are outside top 10 that are fairly interesting, but within the top 10, their records aren't all that impressive, and since there seems to be this huge divide between fighters who are part of the top 3 and everyone else from 4 through 10, because of that divide, it makes it more difficult for fans to be interested in those divisions. You're listening to the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast, coming back after a short break here. See you soon.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
And we are back. I am naming the top 12 fighters right now for the UFC in the women's divisions. And coming in at number 4, we got Carla Esparza. Yes, I firmly believe that Carla Esparza is the best women's fighter right now in the UFC who is not a champion. Which is ironic, because for the better part of 2020, I've been making fun of Carla Esparza because she's always being fed prospects after prospect after prospect after competing between the rankings of 5 through 10 for all of 2020 and for most of 2019. And upon her refusing to fight against Marina Rodriguez, is now in the top 3 and is in contention to go fight for the title if Rose Namajunas were to pull out. And the reason why I say Carla Esparza is the best, because out of every woman right now in the UFC, who here is the one who is most likely to defeat their respective champion in the division? Most likely, I gotta say Carla Esparza. Carla Esparza, more so than any other fighter who is not a champion, is the one who I believe is most likely to become a champion at some point in the near future. There is nobody right now in the UFC Women's Strawweight division who is a better grappler or wrestler than Carla Esparza. Maybe Amanda Ribas, maybe. But for the most part, the Women's Strawweight division is mostly comprised of strikers. From Yan Xiaonan, to even Claudia Cadella recently, to Michelle Watterson, to Rose Namajunas, to Jessica Andraj. Yes, all those fighters are capable of grappling. They have some jiu-jitsu game. They have tapped people out through submissions. But in terms of pure wrestling, pure grappling, Carla Esparza should defeat all her opponents. Now, the issue with Carla Esparza, and one of the reasons why she's no longer the Women's Strawweight champion when she lost the belt to Yana Kunitskaya, is the fact that she has a tendency of second-guessing and being very hesitant of herself when she should just dive in there and go for takedowns. Michelle Watterson vs. Carla Esparza pretty much is like the perfect encapsulation of Carla Esparza, in the sense that if Carla Esparza was a little bit more aggressive in her bouts, just a little bit more aggressive and more focused in on dialing down, getting the takedowns in, then she should be able to dominate anybody. Her fight against Marina Rodriguez, that's the Carla Esparza I want to see in terms of activity and want to go for takedowns and dominate their opponent. Alright then, now in her bout against Marina Rodriguez, it kind of backfired on her in the sense that she had good dominant positions on her opponent when she was on top, but then she tried to go for like submissions and like heel hooks when she really shouldn't be. She tried to go transition into different positions too fast and too early. She shouldn't be doing that, but in the stages to which Carla Esparza is not in the ground trying to go find positions or trying to go finish her opponents, she's a spectacular wrestler. I don't think there's anybody in the Women's Strawweight division who can stop a takedown from Carla Esparza. And the reason why Yana Kunitskaya was able to defeat Carla Esparza was because Yana Kunitskaya was able to pick her apart before she's able to go for a takedown. Carla Esparza should be like Khabib Nurmagomedov. Just go in there. One thing that I do love about Khabib is that he has absolutely no fear and is 100% perfectly fine accumulating damage if it means getting a takedown in. And Carla Esparza has a tendency of being too safe. She fights way too safe, and she never goes for a takedown unless she knows 100% certainty she is able to go and pull off that takedown without accumulating some damage. And at number 5, I got here Rose Namajunas was on pace to being like the star of the strawweight division upon defeating Yana Kunitskaya twice. She was on pace. She got a huge following. She's one of those fighters who you can easily see like, oh my goodness, she appeals to a large audience, a specific demographic out there. Like, I was definitely all aboard the Rose Namajunas hype train. Thug Rose. I was on it. And her boxing was absolutely spectacular. The best round she's ever had in her entire career is from her loss to Jessica Andrade. Rose Namajunas has very high expectations going to her bout against Zhang Weili. And it's a flip of a coin here. I'm not really sure who's going to win this. What I am sure, though, is that this bout, if it were to happen, this bout could be a fight of the candidates. And so at number 6, I got GDR, Germaine de Randamie. Germaine de Randamie is the fighter who is the one most likely to defeat Amanda Nunes and end her title reign as bantamweight champion. Most likely. Now, Germaine de Randamie, in her recent training camp, she is a lot more focused in on grappling and wrestling because that's the biggest knock on GDR. She is an amazing striker, amazing kickboxer, but because she lacks that grappling defense, which she really needed in her bout against Amanda Nunes, because of that barrier, she is not able to go and become the complete MMA fighter that, if she were to tap into that, will be unstoppable in the bantamweight division. Now, is she capable of doing so? Will she be able to do it and develop that grappling ability so she can handle the wrestling of Nunes that Nunes has worked on in her past 2 fights? if Germaine Randamie can work on that and be good enough for it to force Nunes to go stand up, I know it's strange, right? Man, Nunes, knockout artist. Well, I gotta say that Germaine Randamie might be a better striker than Man Nunes. And then number 7 here, I got Ketlen Vieira. Ketlen Vieira is one of those fighters who I deeply respect, of the fact that no matter how many times, like her and Lauren Murphy are the same, anyone Calderwood, where no matter how many times they win a bout, just like Esparza last year, they have to go to these insane winning streaks, fighting against people outside of their rankings or below them in the rankings, in order to go and show them that, hey, I am ready for a title fight. I am ready to go fight against a world champion. Just give me the opportunity. And instead, fighters like Ketlen Vieira, they're set up to fight somebody, Anthony Shevchenko or Irene Aldana when she was moving up in the rankings, or somebody like Cynthia Calvillo, who was outside the rankings this time last year, but then became ranked off one victory, automatically slotted into the top 5 rankings. Ketlen Vieira fought against Jessica Andrade when Jessica Andrade wasn't even competing in the fight division. Ketlen Vieira, I respect her for being a journeyman veteran fighter. I do not see her compete for the title anytime soon. I really don't. Especially after her loss from Valentina Shevchenko. I don't think the UFC wants to book a rematch. One fighter who I expect to be a future world champion for the UFC will have to be Yan Xiaonan. So Yan Xiaonan, she'll be fighting against Carla Esparza. Without a doubt, this will be the biggest test ever in Yan Xiaonan's career. Her grappling, her wrestling will be tested. We all know Yan here is a great striker. She's really good. Her and a lot of fighters coming from East Asia, they are stellar strikers. But the grappling isn't really highlighted and focused on that much. It's one reason why when you watch a one championship show, usually the East Asian fighters, they're not wrestlers. They're not grapplers. We got the Brazilians and fighters who are not East Asian who are implementing the wrestling and the grappling in their game. Now, of course, there are some grappling. There are many Koreans who do wrestle for one championship. But Yan Xiaonan hasn't really showed signs that she is a stellar wrestler. She fought against Claudia Cadella, but the iteration version we're seeing of Claudia Cadella right now is nowhere near the Claudia Cadella we saw 2.5, 3 years ago, who is a great striker, but also at the same time can take you down and wrestle with you. We're not seeing that version. And so I expect Yan Xiaonan to go and fight against Carla Esparza, being fully ready for the takedowns, being ready to get on her back and trying to get out of the positions. Yan Xiaonan versus Carla Esparza, that fight is also a flip of a coin. We don't know what version of Carla Esparza we will see. We don't know how trained and developed Yan Xiaonan is as a grappler. So when that fight does happen, it'll be interesting to see who is next in line for either Zhang Weili or for Rose Namajunas for the strawweight title. Another fighter that I put out in my list, rank number 9 in my top 12 here for the All-Stars for the women's divisions, Angela Hill. Angela Hill, the reason why I put her up here, contrary to what her record is that fighter who Dana White knows is guaranteed is going to go come in and pull off a really spectacular performance. Whether she wins or she loses, she'll always bring her A game, and you're going to see these tight back and forth battles that are exciting, that are fun to watch. Now, do I expect Angela Hill to be a legitimate top-ranked fighter? No, I don't think so. I really don't. But Angela Hill, if matched up with anybody in the top 10 of the strawweights, she is definitely good enough to keep up pace with them. She's going to go in there and she's going to strike with the very best of them. Going to go all out, 100% in every fight she goes into. And she's sort of like in that Diego Sanchez / Clay Guida role right now in the UFC for the women. In the sense that you bring this girl in and you're guaranteed to have a fun, exciting show, fighting at a high rate, high volume, and you expect nothing but excitement from any Angela Hill bout. Now, she'll be fighting against Ashley Yoder, and if Angela Hill were to defeat Ashley Yoder, that might bring her back into the top 10 or compete against somebody in the top 10 yet again in the women's strawweight division. One fighter who I'm really shocked as to why they are ranked this low in my top 12 list, Yana Kunitskaya, ranked number 10. And the reason why I'm second guessing myself with Yana Kunitskaya is because Yana Kunitskaya, although she pulled out the fight of the year last year, I feel like the women's strawweight division right now is very packed, incredibly deep. And for as exciting of a fighter Yana Kunitskaya is, just like Angela Hill, I expect her to go into every fight, going 100%, back and forth, fun action. But I just don't see Yana Kunitskaya coming back into the top 3, even top 4 rankings again for the strawweights. I just don't see it. I would love to see Yana Kunitskaya fight against fighters who are outside top 5, which leads to Marina Rodriguez, who I rank here as being number 11th. Marina Rodriguez versus Yana Kunitskaya, oh my goodness, that is a stylistically perfect matchup for both fighters. Marina Rodriguez is one of the more lengthier and larger fighters who compete in the strawweights. And Marina Rodriguez, in terms of like the kickboxing and the striking, I genuinely believe that she can go toe-to-toe, bell-to-bell against Yana Kunitskaya and can pull off an upset victory. Not to get no respect to Yana Kunitskaya, she is an all-time great. She is a living legend to me. I think she is the greatest women's strawweight champion of all time. Guaranteed future UFC Hall of Famer. But between Marina Rodriguez and Yana Kunitskaya, and the fact that Yana Kunitskaya, I so can't tell what her mind frame is following her on Instagram. It's like she really does enjoy her day offs. She enjoys her day offs, and she really wants to fight for the title. And in an interview, she talks about it, where she says that she'll only fight for big title bouts. And also the fact that Yana Kunitskaya, she only fights once, maybe twice a year. And those bouts have to be title bouts. And because of that, I'm second-guessing myself on how far Yana Kunitskaya can go in terms of the competition in the strawweight division as it is building and becoming more and more better every single month. Marina Rodriguez, I expect big things from her. Do I think she's going to be a champion this year or even next year? Honestly, no. But do I expect her to go out there and deliver some awesome fights? Definitely. And so, number 12. Who is the 12th fighter here to make it into my top 12 rankings? One fighter that I was really upset as to leaving out would have to be Mackenzie Dern. I think Mackenzie Dern, she's right there. She's definitely a fighter, along with Amanda Ribas, are two fighters that the UFC really wants to push. In the fact that, they go out there and they pull off armbar submission victories, they can grapple, their striking is, although kind of iffy, there's some aspects about it there they can work on. And if they were to go and work on their striking, work a little bit on their grappling, they should be able to be future champions. Ribas and Mackenzie Dern. Now, it might be too early for both of them. Both fighters are still fairly early in their careers in the UFC. They're both prospects. More so for Mackenzie Dern over Ribas. But those are two fighters who I expect big things coming down the way over the course of the next 2 years. But at number 12, I got here Jessica Andraj. Jessica Andraj. This woman here is deceptively powerful. Contrary to her size, she's incredibly strong. She can ragdoll women. She can mostly outpower any person she faces, whether it be a flyweight, a bantamweight, or a strawweight. And because of her versatility, that's why I put her in this list here. Because more than any other fighter in this list, she can conceivably fight against any champion. And she can conceivably fight against any top 5 fighter in any of the 3 divisions. And because of that, she rounds up my list here for being the top 12. She is fully capable of competing against any champion, any top-ranked fighter. She is set to fight either Lauren Murphy or Valentina Shevchenko. And the fight I really do want to see would be Valentina Shevchenko versus Jessica Andrade. I think that would be the biggest matchup for Valentina and be the most difficult person she's ever faced in her run as a flyweight champion. So with that being said, that is my top 12 best women's fighters for the UFC, my women's all-star, my WMMA all-star team. If you got a different list, if you believe there's somebody else who should be in this list, feel free to message down, comment down, and with that being said, I gotta end off this podcast with a big thank you. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask you, please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Women's Mixed Martial Arts Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.